Welcome everyone to Zoom into Books this afternoon. We're very honored to have an award-winning author, Simon van der Velde, with us this afternoon. He's going to be speaking about his novel. He's going to be speaking about his novel, The Silent Brother, and it is an award-winning novel. Simon was born and educated in Newcastle upon Tyne, where he trained and practiced as an attorney. Writing, however, was always his real passion, and he left the legal profession in order to write. And The Silent Brother is a thriller, and he has a second book we're going to talk about too, called Backstories, which also has won quite a few awards. So Simon, welcome to Zoom into Books.
Hi, Kathy, thanks.
We're so happy to have you with us today. We don't often get people from across the ocean, so this is a special treat for us. I'd like for you to start out by telling people your inspiration for The Silent Brother and how really you got into writing.
So, Kathy, well, the inspiration for The Silent Brother was from working in the East End of Newcastle. Now, people don't know, Newcastle's a little town in the northeast corner of England, and it's a little bit neglected. And the area we worked in, the East End, is the neglected corner of that town. There's a lot of poverty, a lot of drugs, and everything that goes with it. But if you roll back a few years, roll back sort of 40, 50 years, this was a thriving community, mining, shipbuilding. At one point, half the world's ships were made on the River Tyne in Newcastle. And I don't know if people know Billy Elliot, but Billy Elliot covers that time when everything was being shut down, and there was, in Britain at the time, there was the unions against the government, and the government was a little to the right and the unions obviously weren't. And the feeling was that heavy industry, which was mostly in the north of England, was the enemy, and the government basically cut that down. The mines were shut, the shipyards were shut, and the side effect of that was the unions collapsed, but more than that, the society around them, the community collapsed. So what you had then was generations of men who only knew one skill. They only knew one way of life, and suddenly it was gone. And so their children grew up in a void, and their children after them, which is where we are now. We're in the third generation. And nowadays, if a big employer closes, you'll have teams of people retraining, and there'll be mechanisms put in place to try and ameliorate the problem. That didn't happen. That didn't happen in the 80s. So what you have is a vacuum, which was filled by drugs and booze and gangsters. And that is where I set my story, because at first, when I was working in this environment, it was very frustrating, because you try and do positive things for people and they seem very self-destructive. But when you look deeper, it's not really self-destructiveness. They're hopeless. They've got nowhere to go. And that led me to think, well, what if I was born in this world? What if I grew up in this world? What would I do? Because what I particularly wanted to explore was the link between victims and perpetrators. And really, the more I looked at it, the stronger the link is. So that's this kind of social commentary angle of it. Having said that, it is a thriller. It's, it's fast paced. It all moves along, but I want to say something as well. It's not just a thriller. So, it's now on its about 8th rewrite, and it has become more thrillerish as it goes along. But the point is, if you look pretty much at any perpetrator, they were probably a victim when they were a child. And so that was what I wanted to say. That was what sustained me through the probably 2 years of writing and 3 years of rewriting of The Silent Brother.
That certainly is a universal problem around the world with all cultures. I'd like for you to give the viewers a little bit of a synopsis of The Silent Brother. It looks very intricate and well written. You've gotten a lot of great reviews. So could you give us a short synopsis without giving away anything?
So, okay. So following on from what my premise was, the novel opens with Tommy and Benji, who are two little boys, two brothers. Tommy's 5, so he's the big brother. Benji's 4, so Tommy feels a sense of responsibility towards his brother. The father's gone, stepfather is horrible, to put it mildly. Mum is kindly but ineffectual, and there's a Nana who sort of holds the family together, but Nana dies. The boys are left with their mother and the stepfather, and the stepfather's violent, which leads social services to become involved, and they come to take the boys. One of them is hidden and one of them is taken. Tommy, the older boy, is left behind. Benji, the younger one, is taken. So Tommy, we then follow Tommy's story, trying to survive, trying to adapt over the next 20 years, and always within the background, the guilt of what's happened to his brother. He's failed his brother, but of course he hasn't, because he's just a child. But yeah, and he goes astray, and one problem leads to another problem, and he makes some probably bad choices, although you've got to be in his shoes and you decide what you might have done. And possibly later on there is some redemption. There's a little girl, when he's about 7 or 8, a little girl moves into his street called Annie, who he thinks is the ugliest girl he's ever seen. He comes to change his mind later on, but she emotionally fills some of the void of Benji. And then in the second half of the novel, he's become a drug dealer, without giving too much away. He's working for this gang, and the deeper in he gets, the harder it is to get out. And I don't want to tell you too much more of what happens, but those are some of the threads that are at work in there.
Is this close to your own life or personal experience at all?
Well, I mean, it's my town, and I, working as an attorney, as you would call it, obviously I've seen a lot of this. I've seen a lot of these people, and so it's very close to my experience, but to be honest, a little bit from the outside. So what I've done is you talk to people, you listen to people, you step inside that. So I'd say it's pretty close to my experience, but it's not autobiographical.
Well, you're also due some congratulations. The Silent Brother has made the Crime Writers of America Gold Dagger long list. Is that correct?
Sorry, I haven't been clear. It's the British Crime Writers Association Golden Dagger, but it's a great list to be on. Without blowing my own trumpet, I've won quite a few things, but this is the biggest one to be. I mean, it's only the long list, but yeah, it's I mean, if you look at the list of past winners, it's all the crime writers, that everyone would know. And in fact, Robert Galbraith is on this list with me. So yeah, it's some quite impressive company. I'm very pleased, and we'll have to wait and see when the shortlist comes out what happens.
Definitely. I was reading about the crime with the British Crime Writers group, and it's got some really famous people that started it. I noticed that the past meetings, when it was Was it started in the early 1900s?
I think so, yeah. I think, I mean, it's been going a lot longer than I have, put it
I
that
think
way. Yeah.
Agatha Christie was part of it, I do believe. So definitely good company for sure.
Yeah.
I know you have an excerpt from The Silent Brother for us. And I also want to remind the viewers, and also want to thank the viewers who are joining us on Facebook today. If you have any questions for the author, for Simon, please type them in the comments and I'll make sure that he answers each one. So Simon, if you'd like to do a reading, that would be wonderful.
Okay, if I could just preface it by saying this is very near the beginning of the book. Tommy is narrating in first person and he's 5 years old. So be aware you're listening to a 5-year-old. He's in bed with his little brother and they're away. It's very early in the morning and, well, you'll see what happens. So this is about a 4-minute reading and I hope you enjoy it. Benji's arm is warm on my neck, my thigh on his, our bodies tangled together like always, with me on the outside, the first to go. I suppose that's why things happen like they do. Sometimes Mum is with us, curled around me like a shell, with her fingers turning in Benji's hair until I wonder if she loves him more than me. Then I feel the beat of her heart on my back, soothing me to sleep. But not now, not while he is in the house. It's day outside. I can see the shape of things in the light through our rainbow blanket. The torn off edge of our Italia 90 wall chart that never got finished, and the hole in the wardrobe door, jagged as a dragon's teeth. We have Mr. Men curtains. Nana got them for our birthday when we were really little. That was before she died and they put her in a hole, before Darryl tore the curtains down. Mum went into Sunderland to get us more curtains, but she got this blue stripy blanket instead from the scope shop. He said she was a bloody nutcase. We hated him for that most of all, because we knew he was right. Mum smiled at the chimney pots across the street and pinned the blanket over the window. Now isn't that pretty, she said, pressing us in against her softness. Like a rainbow. We said it was too, but it was just a bobbly blanket hanging where the Mr. Men curtain should have been. I'm looking at the blanket now, with the light from outside turning the wall blue, like the sky in summer when it's just getting dark, and the stripes are gold and fiery orange, red like Mum's party dress, and green as the grass in the playground at nursery. It's beautiful, and what makes me smile is knowing that she was right, he was wrong. Benji snuffles and a hand moves against my leg, mine or his, the same. His breath changes, quieter, and I know he is awake, watching the light, thinking about Mum, if she'll come soon, if it's time to get up. I know because it's what I'm thinking, and together we bring her to us. But it's not right. The stairs squeal. She's moving too fast and I can hear Darryl down there shouting. Not the words, just that dry bark, like a dog. The door swings back and the handle crunches. Bits of stuff fall behind the wall. The light clicks. I close my eyes and wait for it to speak so I know if it will be a bad day. I know already. Benji does too. His body tightens against me. The duvet's gone. Mum's hand pushes between us, lifting me away. There's cold on my arm where Benji's neck touched, and the new heat from Mum against my back. I grab at empty air and my eyes open. She's holding me tight. Siggy burnt to nothing in her hand. Benji's face is white, mouth open, sucking in air. I see his scream on its way. They're coming for you, Mum says. And then we're gone out on the landing. I blink up at the big yellowy cupboard that reaches all the way to the ceiling. There are long doors with two short slidey doors above. And it doesn't make any sense because Mum gets one of the slidey doors open and lifts me up high over her head. My leg hits something hard. I kick against the door. Please, Mum says. Be good for your Mum. Be a good boy, Tommy. A good boy. Her face looks broken. There's red blotches on her cheeks. Wetness in her eyes. I let her put me in the cupboard.
Well, that was very powerful and certainly leaves me wanting more. I can tell you that. That's excellent. Well written. We did have, we have several people watching with us. One of the questions that has come in, Simon, is how do you research and develop your characters?
Well, I mean, it depends. I, as you say, worked as an attorney until about 2001, and when I felt able to sort of jump ship and do something different, I spent a lot of time traveling, which is great because it allows you to kind of cast off your former self in a way that you couldn't do if everybody already knows you because they know you a certain way. And did lots of bits of jobs, a bit of bar work, a bit of teaching English as a foreign language, and meeting all sorts of people and just listening to people. These characters are kind of a mixture of myself and my brother and some kids that I met working in this part of Newcastle. So it's, and it is, I suppose, with them, with Tommy in particular, it's that thing of me imagining if I was in that world, how would I be? So that's how, but in a general sense, you see people on the bus. They say with writers, don't drive, go on the bus. Don't drive, walk down the street, see people, listen to people, look around you and listen. So I do all that as well.
We always have a lot of wannabe writers and first-time authors and writers listen to and watch Zoom into books. Do you have other books similar to The Silent Brother? Are you working on a sequel?
Well, I have ideas for a sequel. It was written as a standalone, but because it's doing so well, there's a kind of imperative to say, well, look, what else could happen? It was written, the ending is very much the ending, but I have some ideas about how things could begin again. So that's on the back burner. I also have a crime novel, Dogwood, which is another standalone. There were big riots in the UK a few years ago, and I think the government got a bit of a shock, and some of the sentences that were handed down to young kids for not doing anything very much at all, for running in through a broken window and taking a t-shirt, were crazy. And that got me thinking about what if I was one of those kids, because it could so easily happen that, kids who aren't bad kids, whatever a bad kid is supposed to be. So I imagine, so this is the premise of Dogwood, is that there's 16-year-old kid, he's out in the town, the riots are happening, he kind of is tempted, he grabs something and takes it and ends up in prison, in a young offenders prison, which is the last place he would ever belong in, and he's just totally unequipped to cope with it. And it's the story of how he struggles for survival. So almost like a younger version of the Shawshank Redemption, but not necessarily with that ending. But I like that. I like to you know, the underdog, who doesn't, I guess, but I, you know, especially because of my experience as an attorney, you see that a lot. And you see that, you know, a lot of these people don't need the legal system, they need social services, they need care. But what they get isn't that necessarily. So at least I can be a voice for them, you know. So that's what I'm working on. I've got an idea of a sequel which is on the back burner, and I've got Dogwood going on, and then also some more backstories which I guess we'll talk about later.
So how long have you been writing?
Oh, it's frightening. 18 years. 18 years, I would say, and for a long time I was writing. I think initially, I think most people, when they start writing, you have great ideas, but your writing isn't going to be very good. I mean, because there's lots of little skills and lots of little tricks and lots of ways to do it, and it takes a lot of practice. So the thing is to keep going. I think sometimes people always say, oh, you must act as though you're a professional and you give it everything and never think about anything else. And I think sometimes it's been damaging to my life. So I would advise people to be a little bit cautious. But yeah, you've just got to keep going, and you've got to keep enjoying it, and you've got to do it for its own sake, because it is unlikely that in the first year or two or three or four, you're going to have much of an audience. But even without the audience, when you're on a roll, when you're getting into a character, like that scene that I just read, and you write something and it feels good, and you know, this feels real and it's really working, it's a buzz. And so you've got to do it for that buzz. And if no one ever sees it, so what?
That's exactly right. You need to write for yourself, and then what you write, others will appreciate too. And I always tell authors that rejections are badges of honor. You know, everybody's going to get rejections, and you just have to keep after it and keep after it. There's a lot of competition, and you have been very fortunate that these wonderful books are out, and you've won so many awards. And Simon's also a Reader's Favorite Award winner, International Book Award winner. Have you ever been to the US, or do you come very often?
I have been once. We flew into Vegas for 3 or 4 days, which I wasn't so keen on, and then drove across to California and San Francisco and down the coast to LA, and that journey was wonderful. I loved that. But I remember we looked at a map and we saw, well, if you drive from Vegas and kind of due west, you get to San Francisco. So that seemed like a good idea. And the weather was fine. And so we drove, but what we didn't look at was the topography. So by the time we were halfway across, we were in, I don't know, 6 feet of snow. At one point we were following a snowplow, and then the snowplow turned off the road. And I remember we had Frank Sinatra singing Nice and Easy Does It. And it was just thinking, are we actually going to make it? But we eventually made it. I remember we found a place called the Econo Lodge, which you could imagine what the Econo Lodge was. But I was so pleased with it. I was delighted to be in it. And eventually, yeah, we made it to San Francisco, and then we had a lovely time going down the coast. I've got some relatives in San Francisco, so they told us, you must go here, go there, go there. And so it's always helpful to have a guide.
Oh, well, that's good. I know that quite a few people from the US and Canada love to go to England. And we were just talking about the coronation before we came on the air. And that has been a huge story here in America. And I know we were talking that some of the people who live in the UK are they're rushing to get there, and some aren't, just like everywhere. So Let's move on. You have a second book that we would like to talk about. It is, the title of it's Backstories. And I was able to spend some time with Simon earlier to talk about this book. It's totally unique, and I'm very anxious for him to tell us what makes this book so special and why you think, or how you came up with this idea. It's very unusual. So I'm going to let you talk to the viewers about Backstories.
So thanks, Kathy. Yeah, it is very unusual. It basically does what it says. It is the backstories of various famous people told usually in the first person from their point of view. But the key to these stories is I don't tell you who the protagonist is. So you're reading somebody relating events, often at pivotal moments in their life. They're trying to make it, they're 15, they're 13, they're vulnerable, they're an outsider, they're not the famous person that you know. And gradually the clues get heavier, and at a certain moment there's that light bulb moment, there's that eureka moment where you go, oh, I'm in Madonna's head or Gandhi's head or whoever's head you're in. So that it's kind of a hybrid. It's a story and it's a game, and some people love the challenge, but it's more, you know, it's more than just the challenge, because what the effect is, if I tell you I'm going to give you a story about Madonna, you have preconceptions about Madonna, so you come to it with those preconceptions. If I tell you a story about an unknown person, perhaps you feel sympathetic towards them, perhaps you don't, but you come at them fresh. And then when you realize, oh, it's Madonna, you effectively have two realities to overlay on each other. So it really has a very particular resonance. It gives you something really new to take away. So you've got the game, and you've got that resonance. You've got really something to think about. And it can offend people, because some of my characters are the good guys, or who I consider to be the good guys. Some of them are very definitely the bad guys. But even as I think it's a recurring theme with me, even the bad guys were once just kids who stuff happened to and they reacted. And if you come from a position with no opportunity, but you're very bright and you're very driven and you want an opportunity, it's likely you're going to break the rules, because the rules don't suit you. The rules aren't made for you. The real rules aren't made for people like you. So, and then once you start breaking the rules, things can go very badly awry. So, but everybody's a human being. Everybody's a human being, or at least well, everybody is, but they begin as a sympathetic human being. So this is what I try and get across. And with every story, you've no idea who I'm going to be talking about. So you kind of, I don't know, it's a test of your moral compass. Are you willing to really go and root for this guy? And then you're rooting for somebody, and then you think, oh, I was rooting for them, you know? So it's, people have a lot of fun with it. People have a lot of fun with it, and occasionally people take offense. So, you know, like all books, it's not for everybody, but I'd say it's for pretty much most people.
I just think it's such a unique concept, and I can see all ages really getting into learning this way. You're presenting sometimes history, sometimes current affairs in such a unique way that it makes it a challenge to the reader, and everybody likes a challenge. So kudos to you for coming up with this. I'd love it if you could do a reading from Backstories for us, please.
So this reading is the first story that inspired the collection. And what I'll do is, if you like, Kathy, I'll tell you the story of the story after I've read it, because otherwise I might give too much away. So, okay, this is called The Guitar. It should not be read in a British accent, okay? But I'm not going to try and do an accent. So you just Just you'll have to go with the story. And one thing I should also say is, I think by the end, everybody will know who this story is about, but some are harder than others. But when it's read, when you're here listening, it's harder to get, I think, because when you read at your own pace. So I don't know. So everyone can see if they get the character. It's called The Guitar. No doubt about it. He was a bright kid, talented even. He was quick on his feet and with his mouth too, and he could smack a baseball out of the park. But he was a Jew, and he was short. I mean, like really short. The kid was the size of your average third grader when he was 12 years old, when he was taking those first steps towards manhood, when it mattered most. And this was back in the 50s, with Sinatra top of the charts, John Wayne high and mighty on the big screen, and New York thrusting itself into the heavens, one skyscraper taller than the next. It was a one-size-fits-all sort of time, but it didn't fit him. If a girl laughed away down the street, he felt the heat in his cheeks. Even a simple smile was met with squinty-eyed suspicion. He felt like the whole world was laughing at him, and there was truth enough in that. The other kids couldn't resist. Let loose from class, they could forget about their failures and rejections, their overbearing fathers and screaming mothers, their secret fears and pigeon chests. For that hour at lunchtime, they could be free of themselves, laughing fearlessly while they pushed the little guy around the yard and asked him what he was doing out of kindergarten or where he'd left Snow White. That was the best one. They banged away at it for months, with raucous renditions of hi ho, booming across the yard, reprised with hums and whistles in the classroom. There was only Artie that didn't join in, but he didn't stop them either, not that anyone could or would have thought to try. Back then, it was character building. That was what they called it, while he sat alone on the Brooklyn Bridge and watched the rain fall and the steamships churn through the dirty water. He was still there when darkness turned the water from brown through black to silver in the moonlight, beckoning to him with promises of a better world. The kid might have jumped that night before his 13th birthday. He didn't, but the anger that built up day by day was stored away in his little body. What could he do? There was too much for a giant to carry, much less a guy like him. It had to come out somewhere. Half a century later, we have the benefits of progress. He could have taken his dad's rifle to school and set things straight. But his dad didn't have a gun. Poorly. Even his name was a joke. Small, it meant, and humble, like even his parents were in on it. They were to blame, he thought, with their useless, stunted genes. And there was truth in that too. They were immigrants from the East, short, undernourished people, though not short like him, and they weren't stupid either, or blind to what he was going through. But they could only give what they had. Mom offered sympathy and warmth, and the wisdom of the literature she loved. It wasn't nearly enough. And Dad was just a musician. He saved what he could, called in a favour, and on the kid's 13th birthday, he gave him a guitar, and probably saved his life. There were still the daily tortures, but now he existed in another world. Better than rifles or the dark waters of the Hudson, music was where he found his escape. He loved that scratchy rock and roll that was big in the city back then, and like all kids, he started with imitation. Those upbeat fantasies of the perfect girl lifted his mood, but this guy had deeper, heavier truths to lay down. So he strummed his guitar and he whispered what it was to feel small and weary, alone on the street when darkness comes. He imagined a rescuer laying himself down over those churning waters, like that bridge on the Hudson. The words needed work, but the sense of it was right, right enough to make the hairs stand up along his neck. It took him more than a decade to perfect, but still he knew he had found his calling. He was ready to bring his music to the world. He had to, if he was going to make it through life. There were open nights and talent shows, and he shunned every one. Fear froze his fingers on the strings and caught the words in his throat. To mix this world and that, to stand alone and sing while they drowned him out with their high freaking ho. But maybe he didn't need to be alone. What about a friend, an ally at least? Artie was okay. He'd heard him sing in that school play, and Artie was tall too. Yeah, Paul and Artie's band. That had a kind of ring to it. Better than the alternative. They'd laugh them off the stage with that. I mean, for God's sake, where did anyone get a name like Garfunkel?
That's great. I didn't come to that till just about 5 seconds ago. That is such a unique way to get a message across, Simon. That's terrific. I think that people will be buying that book. I think teachers should use it in school. I think book clubs should use it. That's fantastic. It is available on Kindle and paperback. All of Simon's books are available on Amazon US and Amazon UK. You can get them both places. So I understand also that you have a charity involved with backstories. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah, there's three. Well, I should also say, actually, just if people are interested, there's an audio version of that book read by people who are much better at reading than me, by actors who can actually do the accents. So it gives you an extra little clue. You'd have a New York accent for that, but as I say, I wasn't going to do it. So yeah, I've got three charities that I'm supporting, and my eldest son is autistic, so I'm supporting a local autistic charity. It's such a poorly understood thing, autism, because I think people want a simple explanation of it, and it just isn't a simple thing, and it exhibits itself differently in different people. There's also some of my characters in backstories are criminals, and there's a kind of a discomfort with that, a slight discomfort with it. I mean, people like to read about crime. Obviously, no one wants to experience it, but you want to read about it. So anyway, I'm supporting a charity called Stop Hate UK, which is what it says. It's a charity that's agenda is to particularly, it's against racist and homophobic crime. It's the kind of crime for money, at least I can understand, you can kind of make sense of, but crime that's just born out of hatred. I mean, so and their focus isn't sort of crime and punishment. Their focus is re-education, getting into schools, getting into youth clubs, getting to these kids who are the most neglected, who are most likely to form crazy, angry views, and try and get them to see that in the end we're all in the same boat. So there's that. And then my third charity is Friends of the Earth, because, well, we don't take care of the planet, there won't be any of us left.
Those are all very worthy causes. And you're right about autism. I've published a couple books about children with autism, and I don't think that it can be talked about enough, really. So what's next for you? What's coming up next for you?
Well, the next thing I've got, the most immediate thing, is I've got Backstories 2. Backstories, the book that I've just read from, is a real mishmash of characters. They are the people who inspired me growing up. Simon and Garfunkel's concert live in Central Park, I'm not giving anything away now, was like, wow moment when I was too young, I think, to get it the first, I think it was 74 or something like that, but by the late 70s, you know, that whole thing, I don't know why Simon Garfunkel spoke to me so much, but it really did. And then there's various other sportsmen, musicians, activists who, for various reasons, often people from the 60s and 70s, who just really caught my imagination. And then Backstories 2, which is just about, it's going to come out in the next few weeks, is more historical, because I was advised basically what you need to do is be more genre specific. So Backstories 2 is, they're all historical figures, and Backstories 3 will be rock and roll backstories, and Backstories 4 will be true crime backstories. So they'll be specific, and Backstories 1, if you like, is a bit of everything. So Backstories 2 will be what's coming out soon, and I've as I say, they're all historical figures, but within that I've tried to mix it up as much as possible. So some of them are, again, criminals or musicians or activists or politicians or whatever, that, you know, interesting people. And the key is, obviously, it has to be people that pretty much everyone's familiar with. Otherwise, it feels a bit of a damp squib. You get to the end and think, I've no idea. I've no idea who that is, you know. And the answers ultimately are on the website, so you can get the spoilers. But I would urge you to try yourself before you get the spoilers, because if you get the spoilers, there's no fun in that, you know. But there are one or two in the Backstories collection that I maybe semi-inadvertently made a bit too difficult. And unless you have particular, I mean, it's all there. It's all there. And I think pretty much everybody would be able to get them all in theory. But anyway, the answers are on the website, which you've got. But yeah, so Backstories 2 is historical backstories. So if you like historical fiction, it's for you. And if you hate historical fiction, I guess it probably isn't. But you still have the who done it, who is it kind of angle.
That's true. And I know people are waiting for that. This is Simon Velde is a great new author for some of you who love this short story style of mystery. I just think it's terrific. Simon, I know that you're a reader's favorite, International Book Award winner, and we are so happy to have you on Zoom into Books. We've had people really enjoy that story, and hopefully they'll pick up a copy of your book, both of them. Tell the viewers how to get in touch with you. I have posted links in the comments on the Facebook live stream. And if the viewers will visit zoomintobooks.com, you can read Simon's bio with all the links to his website. But tell the viewers how to get in touch with you, and do you do speaking engagements?
Yes, I'm very happy to do speaking engagements. I tend to do in person in the north of England. But if someone wants to fly me over, I'm very happy to come. But obviously online is probably more realistic. So very happy to do that, chat to people, tell them my experience. Not that I claim to have all the answers of how to make it in writing, but really everyone's experience is different. If you want to get in touch with me, the website is www.simonvandervelde.com, which is Simon, VANDERVELDE.com. I spend a lot of my life spelling my name to people. But yeah, there's a link through there. You can email me at Simon VDV Writer on Twitter. I exist on Instagram and Facebook, but I'm not very good. I've just about got my head around Twitter. So if you want to tweet, at Simon VDV Writer, and I'm very happy to, you know, chat to people, see what they've got to say. And of course, if people want to read my book and talk about that, that's marvelous. You will never, I don't think, meet a writer who doesn't want people to read his book, because, you know, you put your soul out there on the page. You know, you want to connect to people. And of course, it's hard because it doesn't matter how good you think your book is, some people will hate it. Or some people, even if they hate it, that's not the worst. The worst is when they are like, meh. And you think, how can that be? How can you not get anything? But of course, that's reality. And I need to grow up and accept it. But I'm still struggling with that. So if you do hate my book, please just don't tell me.
I would certainly urge book clubs to get together and get Simon's book and then get in touch with him and have an author visit, even virtually to your book club. I can't think of anything more fun. So Simon, I want to thank you so much for coming on Zoom into Books. It's been a delight to have you. Good luck with your future books. And when your new book comes out, send me an email. I'd love to have you come back on Zoom into Books.
Thank you. Thanks so much.